Today I'm going to be tearing into a 1979 Honda ATC110 motor. This is the three-wheeler, the most dangerous machine on earth. We're going to be tearing into that motor today. So, dual range, we're going to tear into that. We've got the Recoil pull starter here with our charging system underneath. We've got our clutches on the right-hand side if you're sitting on the three-wheeler. We're going to go through the top end, our Cdi components up top here. I'm going to show you how to adjust those valves. Please, at this time, hit the subscribe button on the channel. Go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Appreciate you guys watching. This time, we're going to tear into this motor. So, thanks for all you guys do. All right, tearing into this motor here, the first thing we're going to do is get into the top end. We're going to go ahead and remove these 4 nuts off of the top here. This is your top motor mount, and you can see there we've got a chunk taken out of this one. Go ahead and remove it. 14 millimeter socket here. We'll go ahead and get that turned in the right direction. All right, we've got all 4 of those nuts off there. Now what you can do is just take and pull this off. There are brass washers underneath of those nuts, so if we're trying not to lose those, let's take those off at this time. You can grab a rubber mallet here and just tap on the top here. That'll allow you to pull that off. Underneath of this cap here is your rockers. Now, this cover really, to me, is quite pointless. Not 100% sure why they put that on there, and a lot of times, to be honest, that entire cylinder head there is completely enclosed. On this one, you just have another gasket spot that could potentially leak. Again, this is a motor mount area, so maybe that is why they do that, just to allow you to replace this if you need to. These studs go all the way clear down into that bottom end there. At this point now, we're going to take the head off, but we're going to get into the Cdi box here. This is a Cdi Ignition, is what some people call it. There's about 15 different names for it. All of them are probably correct, so whatever you want to call it is fine. Doohickey, I think, is what I've seen some people call it. Spark assembly. Little black cover with electrical components. I've seen that somewhere, so really whatever you want to call it is fine. 2 Phillips screws to remove here to pull this off, and then it's just going to pull right off of there. Another gasket here. You want to make sure and replace this. If you're rebuilding this motor and you order a complete gasket kit, gaskets like this should come with your gasket kit. If they don't, let me know and I will file a lawsuit against those companies. Go ahead and remove these screws on the side here. There's going to be 2 Phillips, and that is going to allow this entire plate to be removed here. And I'll maybe throw in a quick side shot picture for you so you know what this looks like from the side there as opposed to from the top. But pull 2 screws off. They're the larger 2 screws on the outside, and that's going to loosen up this plate, allow you to remove it just like this. You've got a little rubber plug here that's going to seal up that top plate where that wire goes in. We'll go ahead and remove that. This actually goes through the cylinder, so I'm not sure if they ended up building that cylinder around this or if they shoved it through after the fact, but it is fairly difficult to pull out of here. You can use a pick or a screwdriver to help pull it out of there, but I really don't want to damage the end of that plug there or pull it off, so I may work on that here in a bit. Next thing we're going to do, pull this cover off here. So we've got 3 bolts around the outside there. How I remove those is grab an impact driver like this. If you don't have one of these, I would suggest getting one of these tools. I'll put a link below. And take and hit it like that. Normally, if you've got something to push up against, I want to get this to where you guys can see me doing this. So I'm just going to throw my motor around like that a little bit. But otherwise, if you have something behind here or somebody to hold it, just so it doesn't bounce like this is doing, it makes it a lot easier. But all it takes is 3 taps on there, and you're able to pull these bolts out of here. Go ahead and pull those 3. I would not suggest just grabbing a screwdriver and trying turning those off. They are fairly difficult to do that. It's actually not even the right size bit for these bolts. And now we can take and tap this off. And we're going to have to remove this 10 millimeter bolt here to get this the rest of the way off. So grab our impact here, 10 millimeter socket. Remove that. Make sure you're turning that the right direction, counterclockwise. Now you're going to be able to pull all that off. You're actually pulling it right off of your camshaft there. So before you get too much farther, remember to pull. There's a little pin. You've got to have little pliers to do this. You can take and pull that pin out. Very, very small. You can probably barely even see it in this video. But that, when you go to pull this cover off of there, this could potentially damage that seal that's right there. So make sure you pull that. Make sure you keep that handy because you're going to want to put that back in there. That is what holds this piece in place there. Otherwise, that's just going to spin with the camshaft. Now we're able to grab our rubber mallet again and tap that right off of there. Another gasket there. You're going to be loaded up with gaskets by the time we're done here. So make sure you get all these gaskets replaced. Make sure they're all in good condition when you're going back together. This is literally the worst design in the world. Why would you even run this through your cylinder like this? 41 years ago. This year is 2020. It was built in 79. 41, yeah, I believe that's correct. So there's your point system there. I'll go through on a separate video how to replace, how to adjust, and how to determine if these are good or bad. I'll save that for another video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, because you will want to be notified when we post that video. It's going to be a good one, guarantee it. We've got our intake valves here, our exhaust valves here. To adjust those valves, we've done a separate video on that. You don't actually have to pull the motor to adjust those valves. I kind of forget to mention that on a lot of my videos, and people will start removing their entire engine just to change a spark plug. Most of the time, I'm pulling these engines out because I'm needing to do a greater service to them, not just replace a spark plug. I have the motor out, I tell people where the spark plug is. They feel like they need to pull their engine to replace the spark plug. Do not pull the engine to replace the spark plug or adjust the valves. No need for that. Another gasket here. Make sure that gets replaced. You're going to hear me say that a lot. Here's your spark plug. Don't pull your engine out. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, your camshaft you can see is a little wobbly here. That is perfectly fine. Those electrical components that we just moved, or the electrical doohickey, is actually holding this cam in place. It will not allow it to shift back and forth like this. So don't you worry. If you get to this point and you're like, oh my goodness, my cam is about ready to fly out of my motor. It's probably not going to. Although this is a 1979, anything is possible. 10 millimeter. To remove this bolt here, what this does is a cam chain tensioner bolt. And I don't even really know how this works, although I do know that that cam chain will loosen up when I remove that. So when we get down in here, I guess I'll show you exactly how that works. But at this point, not a clue. Grab your 10 millimeter socket here. Remove the two 10 millimeter bolts that are holding this camshaft sprocket on. So we've got those removed. At this point, we can remove the entire cam out of our cylinder head. So that is the camshaft. Our camshaft sprocket is still hooked up to the chain, still kind of in the middle of this here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to remove this cam sprocket at this point. Bear with me. We might have to remove the head to remove this. My goodness, it is really close. At this point, you grab an angle grinder and do some cutting. You should be able to get this sprocket out of here. So if you don't want to do that, grab a plastic mallet or a rubber mallet, tap on your head there, your ATC head, not your actual head. Find a spot that you're not going to damage any fins. The Joker before me decided to damage that fin there. Probably not going to cause any Probably not going to cause any major motor damage, but it does look a little trashy to have fins broke off. Okay, a couple more times with the mallet there. Go ahead and pull that cylinder head all the way off just like that. There is your exhaust valve. There's your intake. We're dumping oil all over because there is oil up in this head. That is a good thing. If there's not, probably should be a little concerned. Probably wasn't getting enough lubrication up here, and you probably have some worn parts. But rockers here, again, intake, exhaust on this side. Spark plug here. You don't have to pull your head to remove this spark plug. Keep that in mind. We'll set that aside. We're going to clean that up. That's awful dirty. I have got a roller down here. So this bolt went in to a roller. I'm going to try to get this removed for you. There we go. This bolt went into a roller here. and that put some pressure on that cam chain. So it went and sat down in here farther, kind of spread that cam chain out a little bit. So by removing that, it allowed us to have a little bit more slack in that cam chain. We're gonna set that aside there. All right, once we tap that cylinder off a number of times, we'll be able to get our fingers underneath of it, and then we can pry that cylinder all the way up. And sometimes what happens, unfortunately, with these older machines is these studs here get rusty and corroded, and then you have a hard time pulling this all the way up. If your cylinder and your piston are froze up, and that does happen sometimes, sometimes that's what will give you the grief in trying to pull these out. We'll go ahead and smack that one more time, pull this cylinder off of there. We'll inspect this cylinder really good, make sure those walls are in good condition. I'll show you how to measure that in a separate video. We'll also inspect that piston. A lot of times when you pull a cylinder off like this motor here, we didn't ever see it running. We were told it needed rebuilt, but it wasn't stuck. You can see it'll turn over very, very easily. There's no major damage to the piston. I actually don't even see any scoring on the cylinder walls there. So you can take and turn it over at this time, watch your finger. Otherwise you may get it taken off there if you stick it in that piston pinhole there. But you also want to take this chain, make sure you hang on to it. Don't just turn this crank over and let this chain get bound up down in there. You could potentially break part of your crankcase, or probably a guide or a roller down there if you get that jammed up in there. So now getting into the charging system, we're gonna get into this left-hand side when you're sitting on this three-wheeler. I know there's a lot of people that are gonna have problems with the charging system on these, and a lot of you are watching this video to get that charging information, and I'm gonna show you that at this time. Okay. Get it propped up here so you're able to see a little bit easier. I'm gonna wipe down our workplace. That way you've got stuff clean and looking fresh. All right, on the left-hand side, we've got our gear shifter. And like I said, this is a dual range, so you can flip a switch over here as well to get you in the low position is forward, the high position is back. So you've actually got several different gears in each high and low range. So that is why they call this the dual range ATC110. And to pull this gear shifter off, we've got a 10mm bolt down below here. You do want to check this bolt periodically, make sure it's tight, make sure it's snugged up. If it's not, you're going to have quite a bit of slop in your gear shifter there, and then you're going to end up replacing your shifter shaft, which I'll show you that when we get down farther into it, show you how to do that. But it's not an easy job, and it can be avoided if you just keep this snugged up, make sure this bolt's tightened up, make sure those splines are in good usable condition. So got the shifter off. Now to pull the recoil, we've got 3 10mm bolts around the outside. We've got those removed. This recoil pull starter, also a bunch of different names for these: rope start, pull start, recoil, I don't know, maybe that's it, maybe just 3 names. But these here are a common problem. These springs in here, or the teeth in here that pull out when we start turning this over, will eventually go bad. These will need replaced. A lot of people don't like to rebuild these, they just like to replace the entire thing. So these used are fairly valuable. Check out our eBay store, we'll have these available for sale. I'll put a link below. I'll also put a link below for a rebuild kit for those. Next thing that I'm going to put all kinds of links for is your charging system. So we've got your stator here, we've got your weights or your magnets down in the center here, and you need a special tool to remove those. So 10mm bolts here around the outside. Again, try not to let this motor turn over. You could potentially break internal parts if you let that chain roll over down in the crankcase there. Nice thing about this is it is a big magnet, so anytime you drop a washer or screw down in this area at least, you shouldn't have to go fishing very far for it, although that was kind of a pain in the rear. That's there. This is the recoil pull starter cup gear. It is what the recoil pull starter will actually grab and turn over when you pull that rope start there. This does not have electric start, so sorry about that. 10mm bolts here, another 3 of them. Now our stator here, our alternator, our generator, our magneto here. That's all the words for this component. It's not a whole bunch of different things, it's just this component here. we can now take and pull out. What you don't want to do is grab this and just yank this out, or you could potentially bust these wires off. This one looks like it's in good condition. To find top dead center when we're adjusting valves, I've again showed you that on a separate video, but you've got your top dead center mark here. We've got a fire and a top dead center, so make sure you know the difference there. And again, I've gone over that in separate videos. So you've got a little bit of a hole here on the bottom of this case cover. That's if you ever get water or debris down in here. It's actually just going to run out the bottom. So we've got a gasket to try to keep the water from filling up this area if it's a downpour rain. But if by chance you do get a little water in there, it is supposed to come out that little hole there. You don't want that water just sitting in there. 14 millimeter bolt here. And I like to try to hold this because it will actually turn your motor over if you're not careful, and again, could break your idler gear there. That's down inside your motor. So we'll grab our special tool to remove this. Okay, our special puller here is, it looks like just a standard bolt. Now, you want to be really careful if that's what you use, because the threads on here are going to be a lot softer on a regular bolt than they are on your magnet system here. And by running this in, pulling this puller off, if you're just using a standard bolt there, you are without a doubt going to destroy some threads there. So use the specific puller. It's a very, very hardened steel and will help you not damage this piece here, which I'll have you know is no longer available through Yamaha. Check our eBay store out for that flywheel there, because I probably do have those available. Now I'm going to take and put this in here. This is going to be a little bit harder to hold. So I'm going to take and run this all the way down. This is just a bolt in there to try to hold. So I've got a place to hold with my finger. And you're going to actually turn this clockwise. And that's going to pull it off just like that. Very, very simple process. But again, it's important that you have the correct tool. It's important that you do that properly so you don't break anything, don't cause some major damage there. Again, I'll put a link for this tool in my description below. While you're down there ordering that tool, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell. Now to pull your stator out, your magneto, your charging system, go ahead and just pull it out just like that. You've got the 3 bolts that held this in. Those are already out. This is your grommet here that sits down in this position there. You can actually put a little rubber gasket maker, a little liquid gasket maker around this rubber plug here. That way it doesn't leak water, get dirt and debris in there. Just helps save that area there. We've got a hose here. I believe this ran up to the carburetor. Another one here that ran to the bottom of the carburetor. We can remove those. Those are trash. Those are brittle and not in good condition. So dual range cover is here. I'm going to get into that at this point now. Grab your impact driver here. Do your best not to sling your motor across the room while you're doing this. It really would be beneficial to have somebody sitting here holding this motor. But don't have anybody doing that today. If you've got dirt and debris down in these bolts here, make sure to remove that before putting your impact driver on there, because what will happen is that dirt and debris won't allow you to sit down in there properly. You'll end up rounding off these bolts here. All right, we'll go ahead and remove these 4. Once you have loosened them up, you can put an impact driver on there, an impact, and pull those off. And now we've got this cover that's going to pull off of there. Again, another gasket. Don't forget to replace those. Got a bearing here that's stuck onto your shaft. That's okay. That bearing actually sits down in there. And the other side doesn't have a bearing. So these, we've got a shift fork here. So we've got the high and low. So when you pull that back, it's going to push this gear back. And this gear is going to be engaged then that way. So that's what it's doing there. This lever here is actually moving this fork that's down here, and that's moving this movable gear here. So back and forth like that. Then there's a gear in here that's going to fall into place once this turns over. So that's why when you shift this, a lot of times you've got to go a little bit forward before it'll actually drop into place there. That is why, because this doesn't sit. There's holes behind this gear. I'll pull this out so you can see it. here in a second, but there's holes in behind this gear here that need to drop into place for that to function properly. So dual range cover there. All right, done with the charging system. Now we're gonna remove this outer cover here, but I'm still dinking around with this dual range assembly here. We've got a handful of bolts that we need to pull out. We've used that impact driver to loosen these up and remove these. And now we've got this case cover here that's ready to come out of there. There is a snap, some sort of a holder in here to hold this dual range lever on. We will need to remove that. That way we can remove that fork out. Just grab a pair of pliers, needle nose pliers, pull that pin out there. Now we're just gonna be able to slide this shaft down, get our screwdriver in there. You don't want to damage this because there is a sealed up area there, but you do have to get something in behind there to pull this down. Again, don't try to turn your screwdriver on there and damage that area. Once you get it out far enough, you can just use your fingers, pull it out. There's an O-ring there that seals that up. So that's the dual range. That clip there slides into place there, and now you're able just to remove these parts out of here. We can remove this shift fork at this time. Otherwise, if that lever there was still in there, you wouldn't be able to pull that shift fork out easily. So there's our pieces there. There's our gear that I was telling you needed to fall into place. So there's 3 posts on this gear that do need to slide into place there when you're changing that from high to low or low to high. Got a snap ring down in there. Grab some snap ring pliers. Get it up a little ways, then you're able to get your snap ring pliers on there again. Pull that out. Now we're going to remove that gear. That way all those gears are out of there, and we don't have to worry about dumping those or those falling out of place there. So sits there. This goes on front of it there. This is a separate gear. Inside here we've got a spring, and that's what kind of keeps that in position there, this fork. So make sure those pieces don't get lost. Now we're ready to pull this cover off. You do down in here, I told you that there's a spring for that shift fork. You do have a ball, and all those parts kind of work together there. And then you've got your holder here that will actually move that shift fork there. This shaft can come up. You've got a little pin there. You want to make sure that that stays in place. That is for your gear, this gear here. Your reverse indicator is here. You can grab a flat screwdriver, get in behind that clip and pry that off. Then you can take and pull that plastic clip off of there. We'll set that aside. We'll put that back on here in a little bit. Now we're ready to pull this cover off. Use a plastic mallet. Once we get our plastic mallet, tap on it a couple times, we're able just to get our fingers underneath of there and remove that cover. We do have a gasket on behind there. Imagine that. Make sure you inspect that. Clean that up really good. We'll set that aside. We've got our cam chain that goes down here, sits on the end of that crankshaft. We're able to pull that out. Set that aside. We've got our idler gear here. That goes all the way through. I'll show you that when we get to the other side where that goes through. And then we also have another idler here. And this one is held on. Here we go. Sophistication for the 1979. This is your cam chain tensioner here. So 14 millimeter plug. What that's doing is actually putting pressure on here, which is putting pressure on this roller here. So if we were to take and remove this 14-inch plug, this 14-inch bolt here, this is going to loosen up this gear. We've got it removed. Now we're able to take and push this back. Remove that plug there. Now we're able to take a screwdriver, loosen this up. Okay, so we've removed this bolt here. This is how we're going to screw this this tensioner in. The tensioner that sits up here goes into this ring here. Now we're going to have to loosen up this 12 millimeter. And this is how you adjust your cam chain tension. So loosen that up. Now this is, again, going to be loaded with tension here. So now it's going to go down. So we're going to get that into position there. So you can do this without pulling your charging system. This can all be done while the three-wheeler, while the motor is in the three-wheeler. So we've got the cam chain tensioner there. You can see that. When that springs forward, that's putting tension on this idler, which is putting tension on this cam chain. So to tighten this down then, It'll actually hold in position there. If you want to tighten it up, it is spring loaded here. This screw down below here is manually tightening that tensioner up there. This is locking it in position. You've got a lock nut here, again a 12 millimeter. You can tighten that up to wherever you want it to be. And then this one's snugged up as well. So that is how the cam chain tensioner works on this ATC110. If you've got questions on that, make sure and holler and let me know. We do have 3 screws or 3 bolts here holding this ring in, so we're going to remove those, and that's also going to allow us to remove that idler there, that roller. All right, we'll pull those 3 screws. Now we're able to pull that ring out of there, pull that rotor there, and if we need to replace that, we can at this time. Again, check my store for there. I'll put a link for some of this stuff below. While you're down there ordering parts, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you are notified every single time we upload a incredible rebuild video. Videos like this is what's going to keep ATVs running great again. So we got to mega this. We can make ATVs great again. One video at a time. So make sure you subscribe to our channel. How about that election? I'm not going to get into politics at this time, but if you want to comment below, you are welcome to. Common problem on here, and I see this is what happened here. You can see we've actually got a broken case here. So imagine that. This chain bound up in here actually broke a piece of this case off now, and I finished breaking it. So what wasn't broken, I just finished it off there. So you're actually going to have a hole at this point here. And this, if you remember, you've got a cover that goes over top of this. So getting into this cover here, how'd that sit here? Oh yeah, definitely. You see there where it got bound up underneath this gasket here? Got bound up, destroyed the case here. There is your neutral indicator, is right here. It actually kind of got up into there. So when that shifts into neutral, that turns this little shaft here that's got this groove out of it, and that kicks that little plastic doohickey there into that neutral position there, so you know, hey, I'm in neutral. So that is the 1979 version of a gear indicator. So real high class, but who am I to judge? Okay, we're going to take and pull this chain off. We've got a sprocket here we're going to pull off as well. And that was awful hard to do. That's your sprocket there. You can see there we've got some teeth that are worn. This is still usable. I don't know. Enter at your own risk. I'm not totally sure I'd buy a used sprocket. Although my guess is you can't get these anymore from Honda. What I wouldn't do is buy a used chain. All my chains go in the trash. You don't ever use a chain again on some of this older stuff. You don't know how long that chain's been in there. Could be 41 years this year. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove this tensioner here because I'm going to get this all cleaned up, make sure it's in tip-top shape before we're going back together with it. And I want you to see what this looks like. So there is a little cap with your screwdriver hole. There's a spring. There is your shaft that goes all the way up in there. So it is spring loaded. Keep that in mind. There is your holder here. So your holder actually goes right down onto that shaft. I bet if we look here, there'll be a little bit of grooving where we ran this bolt in there a little bit too far. So I'm going to keep all those parts together. That way we don't lose anything. We can get ordered what we need to get ordered. Here's your shift shaft. I told you I'd show you that when we get in there farther. It actually goes all the way over to your clutch cover side there. So I told you we'd get to that here in a little bit. We're still getting to that point. This video is getting fairly lengthy. There's a lot to these little motors. So your foot pegs actually mount up right here. So be careful when you're tightening up those foot peg bolts. There's 4 bolts there, and you do need those. They're very, very essential. So keep that in mind. Don't go Hulk mode on there. I'm going to remove your piston now at this time. I didn't do that earlier. I could do that at any point. Grab a pick. I like to use a 90-degree angle pick, and this is like half of a hook pick. That would maybe work. Half of a 90-degree pick. If somebody watching this video wants to send me a set of picks, I could greatly use it. This is an off-brand knockoff pick set that I guarantee will break here before too long. But with you guys' support, I guarantee I'll have picks before we know it. So shove that pin through there and remove that piston just like that. Now to put that pin back in there in that clip, take that clip, open side that direction, take and shove it in there, grab my knockoff pick set and push that pin in there just like that. That's going to hold that pin in place. It's not going to allow that to come out of there. That piston is in excellent shape, which makes sense that our cylinder was in excellent shape. So that must have had some routine maintenance with it. Engine number is on your, it would be your left-hand side there on your motor, right below your gear shifter. I'm going to prop this up. Now we're going to get into, oh boy, we've got an oil mess here. We evidently did not drain this oil. How in the world are we just now seeing that? I'm going to have a mess. We got oil in this motor. Better that than no oil, I guess, but now we just had a stinking mess. This should have been drained before we pulled this motor. Okay, now tearing into the clutch system on this ATC110. You've obviously got some serious heavy-duty components in here that we're going to tear into. I'm going to show you and explain to you what some of these parts are. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Hit that subscribe button below. Also, hit the notification bell. That way you are notified every time we post a video. We try to do that several times during the week, and I hope that you guys benefit from that. We're going to pull the clutch cover off, and that is going to be the right-hand cover on your ATC110. We've got a mess of bolts going around the outside of this cover. We've already loosened these up with the impact driver just to save a little bit of time, and I've used that impact driver many times on this three-wheeler motor, so you know how to use that tool. I also will put a link below. Make sure you click on that link to buy that tool. That way you can pull these covers off as easily as we do. It is essential to get that tool before tearing into a motor like that. So again, we've got the bolts around the outside. There's 9 bolts total going around the outside of this cover. So just to make sure you find them all, I wanted to count those for you. That way you have an idea how many there are. A lot of times this cover will just pop right off. Sometimes you got to get a rubber mallet, tap on the side of it. A lot of times once that gasket seal is broke free, then you can just use your fingers to get in behind there and pull that off. There is your clutch cover there. There is your dipstick. I showed you that when we were servicing this three-wheeler, how to check that engine oil there. Also, underneath of this black cover is your clutch adjust. You can see there is a plate. That's how you adjust your clutch there. Underneath this cover is a adjustment screw. Right there, you got a 14mm bolt, and then you can go ahead and loosen that 14mm lock nut, tighten or loosen your clutch depending on what your three-wheeler is needing there, and then snug that lock nut back up. If you got more questions on that, comment below. I'll try to post a separate video of doing that procedure. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell so you know exactly when we get that video uploaded. Setting that aside, now we're getting into the clutches on this three-wheeler here. We've got your shift shaft arm here. So on the other hand side, you've got your shift lever. Looks like this. When you lift up on that shifter there, it's going to actually take this, shift this up. You're going to actually, I don't really know how it works, but your shift components are there. That shifter and this will be centered because of that adjuster that I just showed you there. At this point, we can take and remove this mechanism there, and we'll take and remove that. That way we can get into this clutch pack here. This is called your primary gear here. It's a very large gear, and I will show you that and show you how to remove that here in a bit. To remove this clutch pack, what you do, you've got Phillips screws around here. You've got 2 in the middle, and we're going to take those 2 off to start. Underneath there, you're going to have a larger nut. I'll show you those here in a second. We've got a smaller tip on our impact driver here that will allow us to get in here and loosen up these bolts. Remove these. They're a tapered screw, a tapered bolt there, so it centers this plate exactly where it needs to be, and it sits down inside this plate here. So we've got this plate. We're going to go ahead and pull this off. You can use a small rubber hammer, And then carefully get in behind there. You can sometimes use your fingernails, sometimes use a soft something. Just pry that off of there. You've got another gasket here. Underneath there, you've got a spanner nut. I'm going to show you how to remove that. There is a special tool that you can use that I would suggest using, but I'm not actually going to use one. Underneath of that cover is a spanner nut. Take and bend some tabs down there. That'll allow you to loosen up this nut. If you don't take and bend those tabs down, you're not going to be able to loosen that up. Next thing you can do, grab a punch or a Phillips screwdriver there. Where does it go? Once you get your spanner nut loosened up there, you can take a pair of needle nose pliers, shove it in those grooves there, and just turn to loosen that up. Then eventually it'll get finger tight. You can just go ahead and remove that completely. If you bang this nut up, if you've used a hammer and chisel and a screwdriver, you will want to replace that. Do not reuse that nut there. I will also put a link below to the correct tool, to which we didn't have at this moment. There is your clutch pack there. This is in excellent condition. We will clean this up just to verify that it's in good condition, but everything looks as through the ran good, so we shouldn't have any issues with that clutch pack there. Primary gear here, we've got a snap ring that we're going to remove. Grab our snap ring pliers there. Go ahead and remove that. Pull that primary gear off. That's what it looks like there. It's a rather large gear. That part that sticks out, it goes down, goes in first. So keep that in mind. We've got another gasket here that we'll remove and clean up that gasket surfaces. You can use a razor blade to do that, a gasket scraper, which is essentially a razor. So quick tip there. Before we remove this shift shaft here, what I'm going to do is remove this 10 millimeter, this bolt here on our shift drum. Okay, we've got our arm here we can remove, 10 millimeter. That is spring loaded. Be careful you keep all those pieces together. They're not going to fly everywhere in the room because there's actually only 3 pieces there, but you've got your arm, your spring, and your bolt. We'll show you how to put that together. Going back together, here's your shift shaft here. Again, remove that arm kind of out of the back of that shift drum plate there. You can take and just work that shift shaft out of there. Sometimes the end of those get bent a little bit. Sometimes they get worn down, they get grooved. If that's the case, they're going to be extremely difficult to pull these off because you're actually going through this aluminum case here. What I would suggest is if that's the case, if it's a challenge to pull off of there, make sure you replace that shaft before going back together. Typically, if those are bent, they will be a challenge to get out of there. That or sometimes there's just dirt and debris on that shaft there, and it's hard to push through that seal. If it is hard to push through that seal, you either want to clean up that shaft before you go ahead and remove it completely, or just go ahead and replace that seal when it comes time to put that back together. Our motor is flipped upside down right now. I'll flip it right side. We'll flip it back on in there. We'll remove our shift drum plate here. We've got a bolt to remove there. We'll also remove our oil pump, and then we'll go ahead and split that case. So we've already loosened up this bolt here. Go ahead and remove that. Pull this plate off of there. Be careful, there's pins underneath it here that do come out, so just be careful those don't get lost if you're tipping that motor back over. Oil pump, we've got a 12 millimeter bolt. And that is actually a banjo bolt, so you've got oil running through that. So it runs through your oil pump there, runs up this line here, up through your cylinder, up through your head, and that is how the top end is lubricated there by that oil pump. So you do want to make sure that that oil pump is functioning properly before going back together. Go ahead and remove these. The 2 small Phillips screws you do not have to remove. Go ahead and remove that. That is your oil pump there. If you're needing to replace the oil pump inside of here, then you can remove those 2 Phillips screws. That whole assembly will slide out. Another gasket underneath of there. And we are ready to split this case. We do have a handful of bolts around here that we've loosened up. We haven't removed them completely. I wanted to show you exactly where those were. So I'm going to grab my impact. We're going to impact these off. We'll go ahead and remove these bolts here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Looks like 9 bolts around the outside there. Take a rubber mallet. As long as you for sure have everything off of there, you can take a rubber mallet then. You can tap on the crank and the transmission, and that'll start splitting that case there. You can see a little gap in there. If there's areas that are being held together, like for instance down here, it's not coming out as easily, I would go ahead and verify that there's not bolts holding you in there. It might just be what's loosening up first, but you do want to double check that you don't have anything holding you together. All right, sometimes it'll bind in certain spots. If you find that spot, just kind of tap on that side. What you don't want to do is take a steel hammer and bang on these shafts here. You don't want to bang on the crankcase. That's just going to damage those parts. The other thing that you don't want to do is get a pry bar or a screwdriver in between these cases and pry on it. Now this case, if you remember, is damaged up here, so this actually isn't going to be any good, but I wanted to show you the proper way of getting these, getting this crankcase apart. And so I wanted to do that without damaging anything else. So once you get this far to where you can go ahead and pull a case off of there, I like to remove it slowly, and I like to remove it with one side down. Kind of keeps gears from rolling all over the place, although I did hear this gear here roll out of place. So we'll figure out where that goes, which is actually just right here, and get that in the proper position there. There's one side of your crankcase there. There's your drain bolt. You can see that that oil is down in here. There's also an oil filter or an oil screen that's down in here to keep some of that debris, catch it, so that that oil doesn't come back up, flow through your oil pump. That is right here is where that screen is. So you do want to check that before we put this motor back together. Your crankshaft is here. You've got your shift drum here. And a lot of times this will either come out together or you can kind of tap the other side of it and get it to come all out together. I do like to do that. It kind of keeps everything in place on how it's supposed to be. If it falls out, it falls out. We just have to try to figure out where it goes back together. You want to get those in the correct position there. So I kind of hold it all together here. That shaft is out. There's one more gear back here that we want to keep track of. All right, after tapping on that crankcase, our crank just came out of there. That wasn't what we were trying to remove, but I need to go ahead and finish pulling this transmission set here. So set these spacers aside. Those are some of the parts we'll have to figure out where they go. That kind of frees us up, gives us a little more room here to work on removing this transmission. That gear just plopped off of there, so that was fairly easy. All right, got those gears out of there, and that's just gonna slide on there. To pull our shift drum off and our transmission gear set here, I've removed a handful of gears already. You saw those drop out, but I wanted to show you here how to remove that shift drum. It is a little tricky unless you've done it before. You can grab a wrench. Okay, you see here underneath our, this would be like our dual range gear shifter housing here. You've got this post here that is connected to the shift drum. What this does when you shift it into high gear, it'll shift this drum into a different position, therefore your gears will be in a different position. You shift it to a different range, which would be a high or low, and then you've got a whole nother set of gears there. To remove your shift drum, what you do is grab a 9mm wrench, or you could actually grab some vice grips, something like that. Remove this. It's a nut. It's kind of a cap that slides onto the end of your shift drum. You will not be able to remove that shift drum without removing this. What you don't want to do, take a sledgehammer and start banging on this, just beating the thunder out of it. You will destroy this as well as probably your crankcase. So keep that in mind. Grab that 9mm, set that aside. At this point then, you can take and remove this entire assembly, your shift drum and your gear set there. So now your shift drum and then your gear set is out. We'll set that alongside your other gears there, and that is your entire assembly. That goes on there like that. We do have a washer and a spacer that we need to put back on there depending on where they go. So that is your transmission. That is your crankcase split on your Honda ATC110. If you guys have questions or comments, please leave those below in the comments section. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. Share this video with your friends and family so we can make ATVs great again. Thank you guys for watching. Look forward to seeing you guys again.